All right, so good evening, everyone. It's a very special occasion today, our colloquium session today, both because we have a wonderful, amazing presenter, amazing speaker, Professor Neal Zaslaw, and of course because we are in a very strange, I would say, situation here in Israel, where at any point we might get an alarm and run to the shelter. But I assume we are all, you know, we are all here because we want to learn, we want to hear Professor Zaslaw's lecture, and I think we are facing a very interesting and fascinating evening, and that would be, I think, a sort of an escape for us. So, Professor Zaslaw, thank you so much for coming, and um, in general, and of course, in this specific period, it means a lot for us here in Israel. Um, so without further ado, let's start. Professor Neal Zaslaw taught at Cornell University for 50 years before becoming emeritus in 2020. A leading scholar of Mozart, Baroque music, historical performance practice, and the history of the orchestra, he is the author of more than 75 articles and several influential books, including Mozart's symphonies, Mozart's piano concertos, and The Birth of the Orchestra, History of an Institution, 1650 to 1815, along with John Spitzer. His revised edition of the official catalog of Mozart's works was published in 2025. He studied at Harvard, Columbia, and the Juilliard School, and began his career as a flutist in Leopold Stokowski's American Symphony Orchestra. He later supervised the landmark recording of Mozart's symphonies by Christopher Hogwood and the Academy of Ancient Music. A former vice president of the American Musicological Society, he has received numerous research grants and international honors. In 1991, he was knighted by the Austrian government for his contributions to Mozart scholarship and performance. Professor Zaslaw, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to talk today, and you mentioned the situation, and I'm hoping that we can forget about it for an hour and do something that we're interested in and enjoy. Um, so here is this unusual instrument. Only one of its sort. A number were built in the 1780s and 1790s, but this is the only one that survives. Um, Now, Mozart's connection to this is that, on the one hand, um, Johann Georg Roser, who was the Kapellmeister of the Linz Cathedral, was a friend of the Mozarts. In fact, he got his position in part on the basis of a letter of recommendation from Leopold Mozart. And since Linz was partway between Salzburg and Vienna, whenever the Mozarts went to and from Vienna, from Salzburg, um, they saw him and sometimes stayed with his family. Um, and he was involved with several other men uh, in inventing this. They were all keyboard players, by the way, not always professional, but keyboard players. Um, and so then there's one more side to this, which is he had a daughter, Barbara Floyer. I'm sorry, one of the other men uh, was a well-to-do uh, merchant who lived in a suburb of Linz, and his daughter and he was an excellent keyboard player, and his daughter was also being trained and was very talented. And she learned, because she was in Linz, to play this instrument when she was 12. When she was 15, her mother died. Her father went into a deep depression, felt he couldn't really raise her, and sent her to Vienna to be with an uncle and an aunt, and sent the instrument along with her. And Mozart was giving Barbara Ployer, Babette as she was called, not music lessons, not only piano, but theory and figured bass and composition. And she was one of his most talented students. He used her to proofread his Viennese publications. Um, so there was an instrument either when Mozart was going back and forth through Linz or in his Viennese years that he had ready access to. Um, Now, this talk has more than one title page because there are various ambivalences and ambiguities involved with this project. And so I definitely want to emphasize that this is work in progress, and I welcome critiques and suggestions and objections uh, at the end. So here's the instrument displayed in the Vienna Music Instrument Gallery. And here's the other title page. And this one refers to the fact that I've been presenting various aspects of this project to various audiences, musicians, other academics in other fields, um, family and friends. And I've been met with a certain amount of incomprehension and also questioning my wisdom spending time on this, shall we say. Um, because they said it had, it was just some weird thing that happened. It has no real resonance in the history of music. I hope by the end of this paper you will be disabused of that idea, that I'm hoping we have a cultural treasure rather than a duck-billed platypus. So how did Mozart become involved with this instrument? Well, I just told you that. Why has this fact been ignored or even suppressed? Because of it, I mean, the sources of it are not endless, but it was there, lying there in print in the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung. So given that every possible aspect of Mozart is always investigated, seems strange to me. So to start with, I want to say this is part of a long history. It's not an isolated freakish thing. From no later than the 16th century, there were keyboard players and mathematicians and others who tried to theorize enharmonic instruments, build them, play on them, and compose for them. And I want to say that at the in Basel at the Academy for Early Music, they have done wonderful research and rebuilt a lot of these late 16th and early 17th century instruments. And you can go on YouTube and hear them playing in this 31 tone per octave tuning that our current piano is tuned to. And people go on, every generation has crazy people who spend a lot of time and money actually pursuing this, including right up until the present, which I hope I can demonstrate at the end if the technology cooperates. And that's when I will deal with the final, what significance does it have for us? All right, so here's how I got into this. I was editing the new Mozart catalog, and I came across this, and I was utterly fascinated and surprised. And I realized immediately that I was going to have to write something for the catalog. And here is the result. And you'll notice that the Kirchel listing is 684 because the way the new catalog works is that new items which by following the guidelines of what goes into the main part of the catalog and what is put in not there, many new things came up that either had been just mentioned in passing in the older catalogs or were unknown in the other catalogs. And rather than put in more crazy A, B, C, D, E for a false chronology, which cannot be accurate, um, we just started numbering the new entries after the Requiem. So after 626, we began with 627. Um, so let's see. All right. So here's what I wrote um, about these two pieces. And if I can, no, no, no. If I can make this go away, yes. And now I can actually see the writing, sort of. Um, so the son of the Kapellmeister in Linz, who was himself a musician and a successful church composer and a composer of light operettas in the early 19th century in Vienna, eventually wrote a memoir about his father. And that memoir was partially published at the time, when the rest of it, the entire manuscript, is in the Gesellschaft der Musikfreunde in Vienna. And he says Roser, meaning his father, had the good fortune to be able to entertain Mozart with his father for 11 days in their home. Now, that's, they never stayed there for 11 days at a time. However, they stayed more than 11 days if you take several times. So this was in the period when Roser Sr. completed the pianoforte he had invented, called the Harmonie pour la parfaite. It should be parfaite. Um, Now that's giving credit where it's not entirely due, because there were several other people very much involved, but he was the chief music advisor. Um, so here it is. Mozart composed two short pieces for this instrument. And then there was a city fire in Linz in 1708 and 1800, and various things were burnt down, and the manuscript was burnt. Okay. Um, and down below, we have in the second paragraph, um, this essay doesn't allow me to a detailed description of this instrument, nor of some pieces of music composed for it lying here before me. Among them, a rondo Mozart composed during his stay in my father's house. And he goes on to explain how the 21 pitch scale works. And at the end, we see that uh, oh, I can't get it to back up. Well, forward. Ah, you'll see that this little incipit here is in that discussion where the son is explaining what the event that brought Mozart together with this instrument and the piece he apparently composed for it. And Ulrich Leisinger added a sentence correctly saying that this can't be the tune of the rondo, because that would be a more simpler cantabile or dance-like tune. And so this must be an episode, which he chose because it shows off a lot of the chromaticism. You can't see the rest of it. And so therefore, we are not sure what the key of this rondo is, because the episodes might be in other keys. So this is a very brief documentation of the fact that from pretty early in the 16th century, right up to the present, every generation has been struggling to deal with this, to square the circle. I don't know, this impossible problem. Here's the fragment. And he shows you the scale and how it's notated, and you'll notice above certain pairs there's a bracket, and those two refer to the note that says these two pitches are so close to each other that they can no longer be differentiated by ear. Now, this is something that psychologists study in what is the lower level of our possible distinction between things that are almost the same. And he got it right. Modern science says the same thing. And also, it meant that the instrument needed fewer strings because those two notes could share a string, or some of it was double strung. All right, I want to point out that the mathematics behind this is not rocket science. It's what went on from ancient times. You can see a medieval illustration of the ratios that are involved with tuning. And you can see that this had cultural and spiritual and mystical import because it turned out to be part of a theory of how the universe was created with a certain mathematical plan and unity. And so I show God tuning his monochord and showing off that the planets and the overtones have the same ratios. They don't exactly, but it's fun to think. So here's a medieval diagram of the overtones. And down below is what it looks like in the current textbooks on acoustics. That's a string, which is simultaneously vibrating at many pitches. If you unfolded it, it would look like this. That the string is doing all those dances at once on the same string. And it's a heck of a thing. It requires a string, of course, of a certain thinness. Otherwise, this does not work. Okay, now for a little bit of sound, I hope. Here's the overtone series. Down below, you can see what the difference is between a note in the overtone series or the harmonic series, whatever you want to call it, the upper partials, and what would be in tune, according to our notion of tuning. So I'm going to play this twice so that you can hear exactly what the pitches are. I'll play it again. So now here are the different sounds that one has to take notice of when tuning or when establishing a temperament, deciding how to compromise various intervals or what you're going to do. I'm not going to talk about the Tartini tones because that's a long story, and not easy to hear, especially under these circumstances. But those are notes that are also affected to be in tune or out of tune, depending on what the temperament is. So they're already, all right, so here we go. Here's what all the notes of the harmonic series sound like simultaneously in equal temperament. I'll play it twice. Here's what they sound like if they're tuned properly. Here's A. So I have to say that the origin of this is not thoughts of melodic combinations. It's really a vertical venture. And then you have to deal with the pitches you have and what you're going to do with them in terms of uh, uh, being horizontal and writing a melody. If you want to hear the Tartini tones down at the note at the lower right, you can, that's an easy place to hear them. Okay, so here's something you're familiar with, the circle of fifths and temper tuning on the left, and on the right, what happens when you don't have tempered tuning? You get an endless spiral that somehow has to be closed in order to be able to modulate around the circle of fifths or any other circle of chromaticism. And here is another way of theorizing this. This was the great scientist Leonhard Euler interested himself in this, and he proposed a new theory for the 31 pitch setup called the tonets, which German theorists and others in the 19th and 20th century have worked on. And he, in his textbook, it's not a textbook, in his book, he showed it as you see on the lower right. And you can see right away that there are adjacent fifths and thirds and other useful intervals. I'm not sure why it says must in big letters up at the top, but we can ignore that. So this is a lattice diagram. And this is one which is mathematically isomorphic to a torus. And so some philosophical types think the universe must be shaped like a torus. And here's the torus. Now this is kind of dizzying, and it doesn't look much like a keyboard. So we will eventually get to unpacking this a little bit to see how it could be applied to a flat surface like a keyboard. The great Dutch scientist Huygens also was interested in this and in fact published two things which are listed here, which were clearly behind what the people who made the piano that Mozart saw were following. Everything they have to say about what they're doing follows Huygens' description. And this is one hell of a circle, and it has the sharps and flats and double sharps and double flats, and for all I know, triple sharps and triple flats, because those come into play too. All right, so here's the same information that was on that donut or bagel or torus spread out in a sheet that begins to look like it might go on a keyboard. Um, and the people who originated this diagram have singled out F A flat C as a triad and F A C as a triad to show you possibilities for where the hand could be. Um, on the other hand, we think of keyboard playing as going from left to right, and this also has to do with going forward and backwards. And that's why there are 6 keyboards on the instrument that I'm looking at, although it's not laid out precisely like this, but more or less. Here is a 20th century electronic version of how to do that lattice. And basically, it's just this. And very nicely lit up so you know where you are. There are no raised keys ever. It's always in the same plane. All right, and here's the actual keyboard. So 37 keys, it's 5 octaves plus 1 note. So it goes from F in below the bass clef to a top G. And of course, F and G are the keys with 1 sharp and 1 flat, and very conveniently, those notes are there at the top and the bottom for whatever purpose you need them. 5 of the keys, as you see, don't actually play anything, but they enable the player to use them because one of the features of this keyboard is that you can use the same fingerings for a piece anywhere in the keyboard. Once you've learned a piece, you can go lower on the keyboard, higher on the keyboard, up the keyboard, down the keyboard, and you use the fingerings you learned, and you get it transposed perfectly into some different pitch. So they wanted people whose little finger had to go down that way to have something to press against rather than inert wood, but they're dummies. Although I have elaborate diagrams of the inside of this piano, I haven't been able to figure out exactly how many strings. And even the person who drew those diagrams for me has not yet helped me with that. But let's look at 1 octave. Okay, this is the octave that would have middle C on the right. And of course, these are the German terminologies. And the dots which are on the keyboard, the symbols which are on the keyboard, the C's, or at least other notes that are in that row, have the dark circle. And the half step between F and G, or whatever other pitches come in that row, have those 3 dots. For orientation, because there are no black keys. Now I'm going to show you something. First of all, this is an explanation of why they were working with 31 notes. Because the more pitches you have, the more possibility you have to have absolutely properly adjusted intervals for harmony. But it gets ridiculous. 36 is excellent. This chart goes on. But of course, start thinking of organ pipes or strings in a piano or a harpsichord and how many different indistinguishable differences are you going to have to put up with to get those strings. So 36 is gold. It's the lowest number of pitches per octave that really sounds good, and the missing sounds aren't missing because they're close enough to some other sound that you can fake it. And faking it is why you have 31 per octave rather than 36, because you can fake it. Okay. Now, remember our torus, our donut, our bagel. This shows you two sets of relations. In each octave. So the dotted blue lines are octaves. Not that you would reach them that way, but they are octaves. And the red lines are unisons. Aha. Now that's clearly important because those are the notes that are sharing strings. The mechanism inside, as you could imagine, is a bit of a Rube Goldberg, but nonetheless, it's very beautifully made and it works. Yes. One of the things that people objected to was Mozart having associated himself with such a thing. Because, as you know, if you've ever read anything about Mozart, but if you've read my Mozart as a working stiff, where I try to debunk it, Mozart is the child who never grew up. He is instinctive. He's getting dictated by God, as the movie Amadeus shows us with the Requiem. And the idea that he would mess around with this academic seeming stuff does not fit his official persona. So I wanted to point out that Mozart understood all this perfectly well and taught it to Thomas Atwood, who happily saved his notes from his lessons with Mozart. And this is just one page, but there are many pages which you can look at in the Neue Mozart-Ausgabe or online in the digital Mozart-Ausgabe that the Mozarteum has in its website. It's pretty interesting. You can see that Mozart, the red stuff is Mozart. So and Italian was their common language because Mozart knew only a little English, and at the beginning, Atwood knew no German. So they were communicating in Italian mainly. So he sets up the system, and then he writes out major, minor, and the clefs and the first and the starting note. And Atwood had to fill in the rest. That was the exercise. So Mozart was pretty well educated by his father. It was not just music. That's more than clear. Now, here we come to the question of why does this matter? Does it matter? What the hell difference does it make? Most people, I'm sorry to say, can't hear these distinctions. I know that because many of my relatives who love music and go to lots of concerts do not know if a piano is out of tune unless it's been not tuned for 100 years. So does it matter? Well, yes, it does matter. And I looked for an example in Mozart's music, and this is a good one. I'm going to play you the opening few measures, and then we're going to skip to near the end of the recapitulation. It's in clear sonata form, and into the coda. And you'll see that there's a Picardy third in the coda, that the B minor becomes B major. Now, on any tuning that Mozart is likely to have used, the B major chord it really howls. It's got a lot of dissonance in it. And you can hear that quite clearly on this recording. Um, and so well, let's listen to it, and then I'll come back to why this might matter. Um, so you see, I'm going to play the beginning, which you can't see now, and then I'm going to try to leap to where the first red bracket is. So one of the questions I posed at the beginning was, does this matter to us? Um, so I'll just put myself up as a critic who had to write a program note for this piece. Um, and what I wrote was essentially this, that this is an incredibly moving piece. If you do the repeats, it lasts 12 minutes. It was published immediately by a publisher who usually catered to the amateur market mainly. And who would play such a piece? The chromaticism throughout is astonishing. I said, it takes you from heaven to hell and back again. Um, and at the end, there is an attempt at a lieto fine, a happy ending with a thick Picardy third. However, since that's out of tune in 18th century tunings, it's ambiguous. Maybe there is no happy ending. Okay, so I'm being a big shot and acting philosophical and writing program notes. But if Mozart was playing on that new piano, that would be in tune. And what I had to write my entire thesis there would be useless. Um, and so if you look at the justifications that our current early music people use when they're playing old instruments and old repertories, they fall into this same problem without realizing it, which is to say, they will say that the crunchy thing in the development section is not only does it change key, but it gets out of tune as you leave the tonic. And then that doubles up the wonderful effect of the recapitulation, because not only does the beginning come along, so you've come full circle, but the dissonance stops. And that will not work on Mozart's piano. On Mozart, not Mozart's piano, on this piano in question. Okay. The nobleman who sponsored and paid for this invention, which went on from the late 1770s until uh, actually 1782, jumped the gun with an article that was published in two French journals announcing that they finally solved it and they have an instrument in Vienna which works and does all of these wonderful things. Now, if we look at my English translation, you'll see that one of his claims is, by the way, this nobleman was himself a brilliant keyboard player. And he bankrupted his family doing this project. He actually had to flee from Austria because he couldn't pay his taxes. So that's a kind of uh, uh, serious application to a project. He says that this is more ease. And every keyboard player I've shown this to says, you have to be kidding me. But he's referring to the fact that it's isomorphic in a way that you can play anywhere on the keyboard. You don't have to have different fingerings. And that has its merits. All right, now, if the gods of technology are with us, I'd like to show you a recent piece. You can see that this keyboard solves the problem in a different way, but it solves it. Okay. Um, you can see me and hear me again?
Yeah.
Lovely. I'm sorry I ran on so long. I'm dying to hear what the questioners have to say.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, we're going to do it this way. So we have two respondents that prepared 10-minute responses, and then we will open the discussion up for everyone. So our first responder is Alon Schab. Alon is a musicologist, composer, and recorder player. He is a professor at the Department of Music at Bar-Ilan University. He is the author of the Sonatas of Henry Purcell, Rhetoric and Reversal, and A Performer's Guide to Transcribing, Editing, and Arranging Early Music. He is currently researching the music of Georg Muffat, as well as working on several editorial projects, including Purcell's King Arthur. Alon, stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Um, and well, um, um, I think I will pose a question. My whole response will be actually a serious question. I hope serious. Uh, my sense is that the generations-long fascination with the mathematics of temperament, that I agree with you, it is not exactly rocket science, ultimately diverts attention from what is, in my view, the central compositional question, and that is what does the composer choose to do with all these microtones, in the want of a better word. What I mean is that I wonder if when Mozart approached that monstrous keyboard, he was um, um, he was mainly fascinated with the question of temperament or with the question of mechanics and ergonomics. And my immediate suspicion is that he was more interested in the ergonomics of this instrument. And what matters here for me is that on a conventional keyboard, the flats and sharps are set further back. Oh, I don't know what happens at your. I have an alarm here. Are we taking a break?
I
Sorry?
think yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, let's take a few minutes break.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yes. So, yeah, so we'll take a few minutes break. We have an alarm here in Tel Aviv.
Oh,
I'm sorry about that. We
yes.
will be back shortly. Um, stay safe.
So, as I started, um, what I'm particularly fascinated about is the issue of ergonomics. And for me, when Mozart approached this instrument, um, I would imagine that he was fascinated by the potential of that instrument, less for its, let's say, harmonic um, accuracy, and more for its, for example, a potential to amaze under the fingers of a virtuoso. So when I thought about the ergonomics of this instrument, I thought to myself that if we imagine an E flat chord, when it is being played on a piano, on a normal keyboard, we have the E flat and the B flat and the E flat, and the low E flat is played by the little finger. I mean, if we're thinking about the left hand for the moment, left hand little finger plays the bass and the thumb plays the upper note. And we have this third here. which of course cannot anatomically be played at this position on the keyboard, but rather here. So the structure of the human hand dictates a certain position of the fingers. And that is fine, because when we try to do the same in this keyboard, we do this, right? We have E flat, G on a higher plane, we have B flat, and we have E flat. Now, that is fine, I think, but the problems start to occur when we try to play a chord where the third would be on a lower plane. So if one tries to produce a G minor chord on this instrument, one has to play this. And this requires a very special hand. Now, that is, for me, an exquisite compositional challenge, because the composer, who does not usually have to think about the limitations of a very specific minor chord in root position, now has a keyboard that really challenges some every well, not every, but many minor chords and many other chords as well. But basically, if they try to produce chords like G minor, C minor, or F sharp minor, this creates a sort of a problem. So I thought to myself that composing even a simple rondo like this while avoiding certain sonorities is very, very challenging. Now, what I found fascinating about this fragmentary rondo that you presented in the slideshow is that I think, with the exception of bar 9, I didn't find really any challenges of that kind. I mean, there is one C minor chord there, and there was another chord, this German chord there, which he begins with an A flat, and then the bass changes to a double sharp G. Which for me musically, that's the most interesting point, because this is this gives us perhaps a window to what Mozart would have wanted to hear in this very characteristic progression from the German chord to the dominant, passing through this what would be an A natural, but here he wants something that is lower, and that is interesting. That I find really, really interesting, because that is perhaps the only place in the fragment that really reveals a special sonority, a special harmonic sonority that he can achieve in no other way. And also, of course, the grace notes, which use the lower keyboard, these very quick triplets, which is, again, that's an interesting thing, because I don't think that when designing this keyboard, the designer thought about, oh, that would be nice for little grace notes that are sort of microtonal ornaments. He thought about perfect harmony. And Mozart, I'm quite sure that although he was one of the most creative persons of that century, I'm sure that this kind of ornament he already encountered in existing works that he was presented with. But that is the kind of a, a use that is not, it's outside the original design, I think, of that instrument. And this I find also fascinating. So in short, what I would like to ask is, in what ways, outside the achievement of accurate harmony, Mozart would have been both enabled by this instrument or restricted by this instrument. And I think that once we establish that, we have an interesting aspect of Mozart's creativity that is otherwise inaccessible to us.
Thank you. That's a very sharp observation and one that I hadn't made, and I'm glad to hear it. And I accept your idea that musicians don't work on a blank slate, but they like to overcome certain things. Sometimes they set the problems from themselves, and sometimes the situation sets the problem, as you very nicely pointed out. So I have two things to say. The first is to go back to our the last musical example of that waltz. That man who was blessed with incredibly long fingers, who was playing and was able to play legato across bizarre stretches, shows you that you can reach all sorts of things. I'm reminded of in my misspent youth as an orchestra musician, I one concert I played, Rudolf Serkin was playing the Schumann piano concerto, and the stage happened to be very shallow. So I was sitting right next to him because things had been stretched and condensed, which was a very interesting experience, partly because he made a lot of noise, snorting and so on, but also because I saw that his fingers were so thick that he cannot fit between the black keys. And he was playing beautifully, not going where you said one must go. So that proves nothing, but I'm just pointing out that things that come up in music that somebody says, oh, that's impossible. Often somebody comes along and says, oh, well, I'll figure out how to do that. So that's one point. The other point is that we understand that the concept has to do with an almost platonic desire to have pure intervals. That chart that I showed where the octaves and the common tones were, I could have made one of those for major and minor thirds. And there's a similar kind of interlocking. And what was so fascinating about Georg Vogler is that he has decided, well, I have all these extra pitches and I'm going to use them melodically. And so a chromatic scale is is actually an enharmonic scale, and it's quite it kind of gets the wax out of your ears. But I don't think they were thinking melodically. I think really you can fake all sorts of things. I don't know if you noticed that the piano actually has a sustaining pedal that's broken between bass and treble, right? There are two knee levers, so you can have the bass resonating and legato or just the treble or both. So that's one thing that pianists nowadays depend on very heavily is the ability to keep the note going while moving your hand. Um, um, and well, whatever I was going to say has slipped my rather ancient cortex. Um, but the I'm collecting an anthology of pieces written for instruments of this kind of tuning. And there will be no later than, say, Beethoven. And there'll be at least a dozen, maybe more pieces. And many of them have in the title the word maze, M-A-Z-E. And they are structured as the way Bach sometimes does, strange harmonic ventures and then getting out of it by one way or another. Um, and those, I think, do involve a little bit of fancy finger work, which somewhat lessens the advantage of the isomorphic feature, which is that you can use those fingerings anywhere. Um, because if they're impossible in one place, they're impossible all over the keyboard. So I don't know what else to say about that, but I'm very pleased with your observation about a little indication of a stylistic thing. Thank you.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. So let's quickly move on to our second responder. Aviram Freiberg is an Israeli multifaceted musician. He's a horn player, singer, composer, pedagogue, researcher, and entrepreneur. He holds a Bachelor of Music in Horn Performance from the New England Conservatory, an MA in Musicology from Bar-Ilan University, and a PhD in Musicology from the University of Haifa. His research focuses on the Biedermeier period and its esoteric instruments, and he has presented at national and international conferences. Aviram has performed for over 2 decades as a horn player in Israeli orchestras and has appeared as a singer in recitals, opera productions, and concerts with choirs and ensembles. As a composer, he focuses primarily on opera. 4 of his operas have been performed, and his Sinfonietta premiered at a Carnegie Hall Gala concert in 2025. He is co-founder of Opera Tzafon, a center for contemporary Israeli opera, and serves as the Israeli representative of the International Horn Society. Aviram, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barak. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Alon. Thanks, everybody. Well, I will continue in the footsteps of Alon regarding how would I say, um, Alon describes it as the ergonomics of the instrument. Yeah. Um, So first, I would like to state some observations I had about there are circles on every C key, and then there are 3 dots between the F and G's, which resembles in a way the way a harp strings are dyed. So the C's are dyed in red, and the F's are dyed in blue, and it's kind of resembling these patterns. So it helps uh, it helps the performer uh, to get orientated on this key. I remember I was drawn, my attention was drawn to your remark that, and which I don't know whom did you quote, about that this keyboard makes ease the transposition of melodies or pieces or whatever. But that doesn't resolve the intonation problem, because if something is uh, not equally tuned or imperfectly tuned, it will still be as imperfect when transposed. So that's a question.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think that's quite right. Every note, you saw in the middle there's a C major diatonic keyboard. Well, I don't know if it's diatonic, but just no accidentals. And if you were thinking from there, any note you choose has the sharp directly above it and the double sharp above that.
Mhm.
And that same key has its flat below it and its double flat. And if you move up or down, that's still true. I'm not sure, but I think this means that the tuning is going to be the same no matter where you put your hands. If you can't play on the sixth keyboard is there, as the nobleman says in his blurb, for amateurs who can't cope with the fingering, and can be, I guess, although the diagrams I have don't show this, I assumed before I saw the diagrams that this meant you could couple uh, the accidentals from the upper keyboard to that lower keyboard. Because if you're at the lower keyboard or the higher keyboard, if you're at the lower one, you have lots of sharps and double sharps, and you have no flats. Yeah. But anything between 2, 3, 4, and 5, in theory, has all the, well, I don't know the answer to that. But did we see a spreadsheet? Were we shown a spreadsheet in the last question period of the tuning? And does that give us
Mine.
something to look at? Yes. It
Um,
flashed by and I didn't know quite what it was.
I can share it again. I haven't used it, but as a during my attempts to make sense of all the cents there, I prepared a spreadsheet that simulates this. I mean, I need to have some sort of basic. What's the frequency for middle C usually?
Oh,
I
it's
think it's
probably
271. I think it's 271 or something. No, it's not in cents. It doesn't matter. If I just put a dummy 500, and then we have the all the cents. Um, uh, I just need
right.
it to be a positive number. um,
All right. So
because
my
the
question
yeah.
is, if you center yourself on the non-accidentals in the middle, can you not move up one keyboard or move down one keyboard from it and still have precisely the same tuning, just at a different pitch?
Yeah, I mean, it's like playing in E flat major. I mean, E flat major would be this, and
Yeah.
its relative sharps, which are naturals, are one layer above, and its flats are the double flats. So yeah, I
Um,
think that's basically the incentive of having five different layers.
yes. Aviram,
I
Uh,
you, as a singer, must know the convenience of transposing leader or other things down and up for convenience sake. Is
Yes,
that
but it's uh, I guess I what I was thinking is that what's the use of having all these uh, enharmonic or microtonal divisions if the tuning is equalized, then there is no need of that sort of just tuning. Double punt. But sorry. But
well, the need in the first instance is applying it to 18th century music, where you're not going to do the kind of slides and modulations that we heard in the waltz. Um, but in the waltz, he has taken the resources that have been given to him, and he's using these pitches melodically. And he made that clear at the ending, where he had to approach the high tonic with his right hand, and he went through all the pitches leading up to it rather than staying in one key or another. And therefore, when it got to the final triad, which was perfectly in tune, it sounded dissonant.
yeah, I agree that the use of the keyboard's possibilities by the contemporary in the waltz was a contemporary use of microtonal features, but which was not aesthetically or stylistically corresponding to what 18th century uh, musicians would have used this ability. However, um, well, it's just me. I'm still not convinced that
Oh, well, most people aren't, because it might be a big fuss about nothing. Um, but I'm struck by the fact that people keep trying, right? Clearly, it's some kind of frontier that people want to conquer uh, for whatever reason, and maybe we have several reasons.
because
Um, I was struck by every major triad that appeared in that waltz was in tune, but many of them sounded horribly out of tune because we were thinking in a different key. Um, and that is raising chromaticism into some new realms. Mozart may have started out just playing in a chromatic way that he was familiar with, but tuning it. But pretty soon, a curious guy like that, I think, was likely to start fooling around with those other pitches. I don't see how. And of course, he was perfectly competent at the organ, which, although the keyboards are on different levels, still had that whole idea of moving your hands forward and backward. But your point is well taken, and a lot of the people who said to me, "Aren't you wasting your time?" were probably thinking, "So what?" And I was trying to somehow present the what that they thought was missing.
well, I don't see if well, let's keep it this way, but I'm not sure I managed to express my
Well, in any case, I did not
myself
convince
well.
you. I did not convince you, and you're not the only one. In fact, so far, I think the majority of people to whom I've exposed this have been pretty skeptical.
And I have some
Yes, please.
technical questions about the notation. I assume the notation you used are realizations, are modern realizations. Uh,
No,
is that the way?
no, they're
Uh,
right there in that report. Um, and they're in two reports. One is the nobleman who bankrupted himself to fund this project, who wrote that article for the French press. He spells that out very clearly, the same symbols. And the other is the son of the Kapellmeister in the, oh, I don't know, maybe 1820s, writing about his father, and he uses the same symbols. So that is not a modern thing.
Okay, and do you know more of the origins of this
I wish I
notation?
did.
Hmm.
Um, by the time I finish editing this anthology of pieces written um, for extreme harmonic instruments of some sort, I mean, string, yeah. Um, I may have a better idea of the notation because though not too many pieces survive, those that survive clearly are notated in one way or another. But I
Hmm.
haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah. And where was this piece related to Mozart, this rondo, this segment of the rondo found?
In the Gesellschaft der Musikfreunde in Vienna is the papers of the son of the Kapellmeister, who was the main musical advisor and the one who exposed the Mozarts to this instrument when they went through Linz. He wrote a biography of his father that was quite long, and excerpts were published in the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung in I think 1815 or so. So the idea was public, but the part I showed you, the music and the explanation of the scale and the symbols, was not in what was published. And it's so we're talking about between the early 1780s and the 19 teens. There's an agreement that those are the symbols that went along in the minds of the people who worked up this machine.
Yeah. And almost close to last question. Um, if we can go back uh, to the chart of the 31 divisions of the octave.
Oh, that circle.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know.
If while we can find it, I'll say the question. I found some discrepancies in the way the uh, the enharmonic notes in between um, the major and minor seconds are divided. Uh, so at times the double sharp and double flat, like B
Here it
double
is.
sharp and D double flat, uh,
Can you
and
see, excuse me, can you see our screen, my screen?
not.
Oh, it disappeared. Well, there it is.
I actually have it, so maybe I'll try to share it and let me know if
Okay,
you can.
I have it up in front of me so we can discuss it.
So between C and D, there are two pairs of one is B double sharp and which is similar to D double flat. And then there is C double sharp, which is similar to E double flat. But then, um, oh,
not this, not that. Yes, keep going back. Oh, one after that, maybe. And it's
It's
near.
forward. It's forward. Yeah.
All right.
No. No, it's to the back.
Oh, you passed it. Uh, I don't know what happened. I saw it flash by.
I think it's in the textual account where you have
Oh, it's in mine, but not in
it's in
yours.
number 6, I think. Slide number
No,
6.
well, no, actually, I discovered at the last minute that it was missing and put it, I thought it was in there, and I put it into my version, and I don't think Rob got it. So,
Okay. Okay. There are times there that the same note, let's say E flat, appears twice. First below um,
oh,
below
yeah,
the
that
D
was it.
sharp and then
Well,
above the D sharp. So why is this discrepancy, or that I didn't understand something about this chart?
well, I cannot answer you because I haven't done that analysis, which you just did very quickly. And so I'm caught in an embarrassing position of saying I don't know. I'd have to, uh, it may not be rocket science, but I'd have to think about it for a while.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. I would like to conclude in a few sentences that in the way I grasp it is that this kind of keyboard is a manifestation of the desire to have a well-tempered clavier without having to compromise about tuning and about the intonation, because it gives the entire possibilities. And in a way, it is similar to I would like to compare it to the invention um, of the valve horn, because the valves and it's the same debate, the same question. Were the valves invented in order to uh, enable playing in all keys, or were they
Also, to have an even scale, because if you're
exactly,
making half steps by putting your hand in and out, you're going to have muffled notes and snarling notes and clear notes.
exactly, and
Sure.
that's relate exactly to the transposition
Yes,
you were
yes.
mentioning before.
And as a flutist, I also learned to play the one key flute. Uh, you have to really struggle with intonation on that because you have only one key and the rest is out of tune in every key, and you have to fix it. And then you see more and more keys until there are 12 of them. And it's pretty complicated and heavy. And then the bone system comes along, which isn't perfect, but it's apparently well enough that it is still used. So yes, I agree with you that I mean, after all, a good 18th century forte piano is not even timbred from high to low. You have a distinct difference between the bass range, the tenor range, the alto range, and the soprano range. And when you play two of them against each other, it really sounds like a dialogue rather than a blend. Um, and a modern piano is a good piano if and only if it has an even scale, which is the opposite idea. So you're absolutely right that we're at the beginning of this idea of solving. Oh, there's a child talking to us.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah, so I agree with you that this all goes together. Um, and, you know, nowadays, vibrato on a violin is the normal tone production, and stopping it is a special effect. Okay, that was the opposite in the 18th century. The vibrato tended to be an ornament of some sort that made a note quiver passionately or whatever. Um, and now, in those days, the pedal was operated by your knee, and was therefore not really meant to go on and off and on and off and on and off. The modern pianists use the pedal almost all the time. They get the best sound, and it covers up a few unfortunate moments. Um, so yes, I think your observation is right on.
Thank you for the answers and for the patience and
Oh, it's my pleasure. If I could have discussions like this every day, I'd be happy.
great.
Thank you so much, Aviram. It is getting quite late here, but I would want to give an option for maybe a short question from anyone else, if
Yes.
anybody else has an observation or question. Yes, Uri, go ahead.
Right, it's really terribly late, so I'll be very brief. Thanks a lot, Neal, for this really extremely inspiring talk. And yes, it has been tried all over, actually in all generations, I think from Renaissance to our days. And Vincentino and what the Studio 31 in the Schola does is a continuation of this. Well, incidentally, I happen to collaborate with some physicists, and they recently discovered something, or I became familiar with a completely different or a pinpointed explanation why 31. So it's not that you can just pick subdivisions at random. So 36 is not necessarily better than 31. So if is it possible to share screen? Just by
Yes, the screen showing the possibilities starting with 12 strings per octave, 12 pitches per octave, and working its way up. But what
right.
you,
So
yeah, yes.
yes, this has been well, a research project into, well, they named that the consonants or the consonant.
Sorry, I lost your sound. Can't hear you. Your microphone is off.
Yes, that
There we go.
happened of itself,
Okay.
right? So what you see, the chart done by actually somebody who is an engineer, and his project was to look into well, equidistant subdivisions of the octave above 12, actually, yes, from 12 on, and find some kind of a parameter which he defined as the consonant quality or the ultimate consonant quality of the subdivisions. And interestingly enough, I won't explain it because I don't, well, it's rocket science actually, so I don't understand it to the very last detail. But what happens is that you add or aggregate all the possible intervals created by each of these subdivisions, and you measure some kind of a value, which is the added consonant value. And what comes up with this, what comes out is really stunning, because you see here is your 31, and it's just below 19. So actually, the hypothesis, and it was proved actually numerically, is that 19 microtones per octave create the most consonant subdivision of microtonal subdivision of the octave, and Vincentino also had a keyboard with 19 keys. So
Yes.
these
But
two values seem to sort of, they figure here as the at the highest positions, and you can see that below that you have 17 and 12 are actually subdivisions. The equal temperament for 12 is way below that.
the example I put up in an old book by a Princeton musicologist came to the same conclusions as what you just said. The figures match each other, and 19 was one of the ways of dealing with it without having to have so many strings or pipes in your instrument. But I don't understand. It says on your thing, it says 35, not 36, or am I misreading it?
No, that's an odd 31. Wait, I'll share it again. It's a very old print, so it looks very confusing, but it's, wait, let me bring it up again. So, can you see that?
Not yet.
Yeah, now maybe? Wait, takes a while.
It says you've started screen sharing.
Yes, now it should appear.
There it is. All right,
Yeah.
so
It looks like 35, but you see it's way, it's quite distant from 30, 34 here, and it's very near 30, so that's 31 actually. So that's your keyboard here.
But no, my keyboard is not 34.
No, that's 31. No, 34
This
is
is
here.
the tall one is
Yeah, the tall one is
31, and
31,
the next
exactly.
one to the right is 35. Four.
And then you have
okay.
41.
Okay, and there is
46.
no data for 36.
No, that's exactly why I said it's not, you cannot arbitrarily, it's not that you just take a microtonal subdivision into 12 and subdivide it again. It's a completely different
of course. Of course,
right.
but I'm sorry I can't pull up the chart I showed you because it was not done by a scientist. It was done on the basis of ratios and things like that. And it represented a summation in English of research that had been done in German previously. Right. Yeah. Sorry, but my slideshow has been recorded and will be online, and so we can go back and look at that slide.
Wonderful. I'm afraid we have another alarm
here we go. Shalom.
I'm so sorry. We have another alarm. I guess it's time to conclude the session. So I would just quickly say thank you so much for everyone. Thank you, Alon. Thank you, Aviram. Thanks, Uri, for the questions.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
It
Professor
was a pleasure.
Zaslaw.
Thank you.
See you at the shelter.
I enjoyed
Thank you very
everything,
much.
except for the.
Thank you. Good night.